Sit back and throw one back with your pinky in the air and a middle finger to the world. And join me, the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, and the rest of the Gentleman Bastard Brigade as we look back on this day in pro wrestling history. But before we do, put that drink down, like, share, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get our wrestling nerd on. It is February 18th, and we're going to start off as we always do on a positive note. That's right, these are your pro wrestling birthdays. 1918, Classy Freddie Blassie. 1955, Raymond Rougeau. 1975, Luchador Charlie Manson. 1986, former CZW standout TJ Mack. 1988, longtime OVW star Hannah Blossom. Of course, on the flip side of that coin, and sadly we have a lot of them today, your pro wrestling deaths for February 18th. 1961, just hours after fighting Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden, Chick Garibaldi. 1989, the grandmother, the pioneer of women's wrestling, Mildred Burke. 1993, Kerry Von Erich. 1995, one of the greatest minds in this business, Eddie Gilbert. 2014, one of the most underrated big men of all time, Nelson Frazier. And 2017, Ivan Koloff. Whew. Alright, enough of the sad stuff. That's right, it's time to get to the meat and potatoes, your pro wrestling history highlights for February 18th. 1978, Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion Superstar Billy Graham defeats Bruno Sammartino in a steel cage match in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when Sammartino gave Graham a kick that sent him through the ropes and out the open door. 1980, the WWF ran Madison Square Garden. In the main event, WWF World Champion Bob Backlund defeated Ken Patera via countout, with Pat Patterson as your special guest referee. Two other matches on that card ended via countout. Samoa Sika defeated Ivan Putski, and Hulk Hogan defeated Tito Santana, all via countout. Three finishes, the same, all in a row. I don't know how that would have went over with me in the crowd. 1983, and we're going back to Madison Square Garden with the WWF. In the main event, Intercontinental Champion Don Morocco defeats WWF World Champion Bob Backlund via DQ when Backlund shoved the referee down after Morocco reached the ropes and the referee forced Backlund to release the cross-face chicken wing. 1984, Brad Armstrong defeats Ted DiBiase in Atlanta, Georgia to win the Georgia national title. Armstrong was wrestling under a mask as Mr. R. DiBiase thought it was Tommy Rich under the mask, as Rich had been wrestling as Mr. R in previous weeks. DiBiase pulled off the mask, but then was distracted by Rich, who was waving at DiBiase from the interview platform. A confused DiBiase was quickly rolled up with the most devastating move in all of professional wrestling. Nah, I'm kidding. A roll-up pin by Brad Armstrong to win the match. 1985, one of the most famous matches in WWF history, the war to settle the score between WWF World Champion Hulk Hogan and Rowdy Piper took place in Madison Square Garden. Of course, this match starts the WrestleMania 1 main event storyline angle with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. This show is also notable for two more reasons. Leilani Kai defeating Wendy Richter to win the WWF Women's title, and Jimmy Snuka defeating Cowboy Bob Orton. During this match, Orton suffered the arm injury that would result in him wearing his famous cast. Speaking of Orton, 1986, at a television taping in Poughkeepsie, New York, Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton shaved the hair of midget wrestler the Haiti Kid into a mohawk and taped his mouth shut after Kid admitted being a friend of Mr. T and saying he hoped Mr. T would beat Piper at WrestleMania 2. And last but not least, 1992. At a television taping in West Palm Beach, Florida, WWF Intercontinental Champion Roddy Piper and number one contender Bret Hart were interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund. Piper noted his history with the Hart family, saying he didn't want to fight Bret at WrestleMania. Hart said whether Piper wrestled him or not, he was getting his Intercontinental title back. Piper said that if Hart insisted, then the fight was on. They shook hands and Bret turned to leave. Piper raised the title above his head and stood behind Hart. When the crowd reacted, Hart turned around and Piper said, "I would have had you." This would become a storyline point in their WrestleMania Classic, as Piper would have the opportunity to cheat and win the match, but opted not to. Those are your pro wrestling history highlights for February 18th. I'm the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, and we'll see you tomorrow.